Going back to the idea of planner as an expert, imagine a community is bisected by a river and there is a serious pollution in the river that comes from a number of sources. An upstream manufacturing plant returns flows from upstream agriculture, runoff from city streets. So the question that the author raises is like, who is better qualified to make decisions about what should be done to clean up the river, the public or technical experts? If the question is a technical question, for example, how much pollution in the river, what kind of pollution exists in the river, how the pollution could be cleaned up, what are the costs to clean up, what are the different alternatives for the cleanup, what levels of exposure are associated with health risk, then James Creighton argues that the decision should be made by the technical experts and not the public. However, if the question is about whether or not shutting down the factory, which obviously affects potential employment in that community, or if farmers need to change their practices through changes in policy, so the rivers are not polluted, so maybe they need to use different kinds of fertilizers, maybe they need to invest in a lot of infrastructure, maybe a lot of farmers are going to go out of business, or if the community should be like regulated, maybe they are the ones like throwing down drain contaminants that are being harmful for others. Maybe there's funds that are needed to do the cleanup, and the public needs to decide, do we do the cleanup of the water or do we spend money in education, healthcare, and other things that are important in the community. So these decisions are best made by the public. A technical expert would then be helpful in answering questions about how much pollution in the river and what kind. So a polluted river is a technical question, but an expert cannot answer questions about the use of the river or how the community is to change. And by the use of the river, I meant like maybe people want to use it for fishing or swimming, or they cannot, the technical expert cannot make decisions about funding or things like that. So these are questions that are about competing values that need to be answered by the public, and of course, like the ultimate decision is for the decision makers, being the elected officials. But the point being is that public participation is very important in these instances. To summarize, the rational comprehensive method for decision making requires the clarification of values and consideration of extensive data, as well as consideration of all relevant factors. Knowing that the technical expert cannot have possible knowledge in absolutely what are the factors going into a decision. The point here is that the rational comprehensive method doesn't rely on anecdotal data. So even though there has been much criticism of this model, I will say that planning today is very much driven by still the rational comprehensive model. Again, even though there has been much criticism about it. The rational model will say that planning, again, is not based on anecdotal data. And anecdotal data is anything that is based on a personal account rather than hard facts. It is sometimes used, I would say not sometimes, but often used by people that criticize qualitative research. And I don't think that the author meant it that way. I think that he meant that there's some anecdotal data, meaning that some people have some opinions, but it's not a lot of people, because if a lot of people then have the same opinion, then it becomes, in a way, not like a hard fact, but it becomes, in a way, a consensus. maybe consensus is not the best way to say it either, but it becomes public opinion that it could not be any longer actually ignored. And we will talk about an example of this in a few minutes. So even though planners request public comments, oftentimes these comments are not considered like data that will actually like change the outcome or any given project. And I will show you an example here from a comment that it was like received by the planning staff for a development called the Violin School Commons. And this planning process only received like a few comments from people, even though like it's downtown. There was only a few people that opposed the project. So this is an example of a person that submitted a letter via email, and you can find actually the comments that were submitted and also the project in the link provided there. So the project actually was a mixed income and also mixed use project. It encompassed 3 parcels of land. One of them was like a public facilities that the city owned, and the city actually wanted to have like affordable housing development in that area. So they did like a public-private partnership with the city with the developer, and then they wanted to again give the land that it was a public land to a developer in exchange of them building affordable housing. So there was like this developer that decided to build their market rate housing and also affordable housing. And this person was in opposition of the project being mixed income. So they will not want the affordable housing. They would like only the condos that were like full market rate, because they didn't want more subsidized housing in the area. So one of the arguments is that there was like there is a lot of affordable housing in Central City, which is the neighborhood that the Violin School Commons is. And he was saying that they already have like their fair share of affordable housing. And there's like 2 neighborhoods in the east side, Central City and Ballard Park, that they have affordable housing. They have like lower income units in comparison with all the rest of the east side. So they very much look like the west side. And you might argue, maybe that homes are not that affordable to begin with. But anytime again that you're going to build affordable housing, people ask why in their community, especially the communities that have less opposition, tend to be like communities that already have affordable housing. So he's arguing that they already have their fair share. And he actually also argued that he had concerns about safety and illicit activities, drug dealing. There's also camping and sleeping outside already, so there's like homeless in that area. These comments again are pretty common among homeowners and from like condo owners, because they're afraid of their property values, even though he didn't make this argument in this quote. So the main argument again was like that there's a concentration of low income units in Central City, and that needed to be more spread. So the commission look at this, and the staff planner look at the comments. Obviously you get back to the person, but again, this is a project that didn't receive a lot of opposition. It was a project that was basically sponsored by the Salt Lake City, like through their housing and neighborhood development department, because it was like public land and they wanted affordable housing in that area. So the project was approved. I did want to mention, and I will put the link to the report and then the news article just for you to like look at it. But in the planning commission there were discussions about the building being too massive, that there's actually like 3 buildings, but they were not they were too tall, or they were not break up the pattern in a way that fit the space there. So at the end the commission decided that less density was like needed in that particular space. So the issue at the end, it wasn't whether or not to have affordable housing, it was like whether or not the building should be as massive. But to be clear, a massive building many times is what actually like allows for affordability, because you can put more units there, and that makes it more cost effective for the developer. So sometimes, not in this case, that could be really like a deal breaker for a developer. So it may be that they will not be able to build the affordable housing precisely because they could not get the density. And in downtown as a whole, people, I would say in Salt Lake City, density is constantly fought. Is something that people worry about, keeping the sense of place of the downtown and not becoming a city that is too large, too dense. At the same time, we have to plan for growth. So you can make your own decisions about that, but I think that this is a very interesting case.